Welcome to the Career Ready Podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all things you need to be career ready with the Career Services Center at College of DuPage. I'm one of your hosts, Pierre Michaels. Later in today's episode, you will hear my interview with Jelymar Mejia, a student club specialist with College of DuPage's Student Life.
And I'm another one of your hosts, Michelle Malik, and I will end the episode with this week's question submitted to our listener mailbag at careerpodcast@cod.edu about being a stay-at-home parent and how to include that on your resume. But first, you'll hear from one of our other hosts, Rebecca Harrington.
Thanks, Michelle. I am going to start our episode today with some information about the career-ready competency of leadership. Leadership is something we hear about often as a valuable trait, but sometimes it can be hard to see ourselves as leaders. Or for some of us, it's hard to find opportunities for leadership. NACE, as we know, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, defines this competency as the ability to, quote, recognize and capitalize on personal and team strengths to achieve organizational goals. I think when we first read that, it sounds like we need to be a manager of a department or a president of a student club to show leadership skills. But when we look at the behaviors that show leadership, they show us that we can demonstrate leadership in many different roles. One of the behaviors NACE talks about is to, quote, use innovative thinking to go beyond traditional methods. Any of us can use innovative thinking to come up with a new or better way of doing something. So I was wondering, Michelle, Pierre, can you think of like any way that like in a student club or in the workplace where we can come up with new and innovative ways to do things?
You know, there's a lot of opportunities, and I think this is one of the reasons why companies love interns, because interns are learning the new things. They're in the classroom and they're picking these things up, and then they go to an experience with a different perspective. If it is from the classroom perspective or just because they're seeing it fresh with new eyes, well, maybe they see something that could be cut or just a new method of doing it, which could be more efficient.
Yeah, I actually had that with my student teaching. When I was going to be a teacher is when I went into the classroom, there were new methods or new things that people hadn't heard about before. And they were like, oh, I want to try that in my lesson plan. Mm-hmm. Another behavior is to, quote, serve as a role model to others by approaching tasks with confidence and a positive attitude. I really like this one because we can all do this, right? And when we approach our work, whether it's at school or at a job, with confidence and a positive attitude, it influences those around us, whether we're the one in charge or just someone in the group. And it helps others see us not just as a good teammate, but also as someone they can approach with questions and concerns. So in interviews, we're often asked about leadership abilities. Focus on what you've done and what you can do to be that role model, to be that innovator, because that's something that's positive to talk about on your resume and in an interview to show leadership. Even if you're not, again, the one that's the president or, the manager, I think we can all be role models. We can all come up with new ideas.
Yeah, and I love that idea of helping others, right? And that's your leadership role because, like you said, we can all do that. And I've done that in plenty of situations. And I think sometimes when we think of leadership, we think it has to be this big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to take lead on a project, but it could just be as small as helping a coworker learn, a new procedure or policy or an online form or something like that. So I love that idea.
Yeah. Or like your department or your group has got a new software or something that's new and you kind of take the lead on learning it and sharing that information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think another important word in there is that role model, because it doesn't matter what experience you're in. Being a role model transcends any setting. It's a role model in the classroom. It's a role model to your younger or older sibling. It's a role model to anyone. It's just how you present yourself that shows good character. So I think that's something that we can't overlook, especially if we have minimal experience, because we could draw from that anywhere.
Absolutely. All right. So there's more to leadership, but we're going to stop at those two today. And I do think that it is really something to think about during our next segment. Right, Pierre?
I think you're right. For today's episode, I'm extremely excited to interview Jelymar Mejia. She is the Student Club Specialist with the Office of Student Life here at College of DuPage. Through the work she does and the offerings of Student Life, there's a lot of ways for students to get involved, which can lead to better success in a job search. Jelymar, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into details of your work, can you share a little bit about yourself and your career journey?
Yeah, definitely. So, like you said, I am the Student Club Specialist for the Office of Student Life at College of DuPage. I have been in this role specifically for a little over a year now, but I have worked in the Office of Student Life for a little over 5 years. I started there January 2017 as a front desk specialist. And yeah, I guess for my career journey, I originally, when I was an undergrad, went into education, wanted to be a teacher, and somewhere in that time, I decided that teaching was not for me. But I was always, heavily involved when I was an undergrad. Even as early as high school, I was like super involved in anything that I could be. So it just seemed like a natural fit to start looking into careers in student affairs and higher ed. And that's how I got here.
Well, it's great to hear that you've been involved as a student and then just kind of carrying over. Now you get to help people get involved. So can you share more about what you're doing as Student Club Specialist and that's impact?
Yeah, so as Student Club Specialist, I am working one-on-one with all of our student clubs. We have a little under 60 student clubs here at College of DuPage, and I am working with them to do logistical things like plan events, get, promos and prizes ordered, catering stuff like in and outs like that. But also I work with students wanting to build new clubs. Maybe we don't have a club that fits their interest area, or they just want to start a different club, and I will help them do that as well. So those are kind of my responsibilities as club specialist. What I think is really cool and the impact I think that has is, student life is all about building community. And of course, we host like larger campus-wide events through student life. But I think some of the best events come from our student clubs. They are, programming to fit their specific community, their little niche of people at College of DuPage. And I think really finding your community and finding those people at COD is what really makes all the student experience worth it.
It's great, to hear how those students can, get involved and, making new clubs. How does that happen?
Yeah. So it's pretty easy. Well, and it's both. So the easy parts are, you go onto our Chap Life page. Everything you need to do with student life is always on Chap Life. And we have a form called the New Club Inquiry. You fill that out and that comes straight to me. And essentially what you're putting in there is your idea for the club. What is it going to be named? What is the purpose? Like, why are you building this? Why do you want to form this? Potential advisors that you might have, all that. So that comes to me, and then I reach back out to any student who's wanting to start a club with what the logistic pieces are. So you need 3 students, yourself plus 2 other students. You need a faculty advisor. You need a constitution. You need all that. It is a cool experience because I think a lot of students don't have, you wouldn't normally get the experience of like building a whole group, like building a constitution, having leadership, all of that, and forming it. So I think it's really cool to be able to build a group like that and kind of start it from the ground up. But that's what you do when you start a student club. Those are the main points.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear that because it sounds like something that a student can be doing and a great way to just get involved and develop these skill sets and to really take a passion that they have, bring it to campus, share it with other people, but also really develop as a professional through that.
Yeah, absolutely. there's just so many. I know you had an episode a few weeks back about like transferable skills, but all of that, like being able to recruit people for your club, being able to market your events, being able to market yourself, all of that. It's just really cool experiences that students can have through being involved and through things that they're already passionate about.
Yeah. And, we've been talking about student clubs here, but I know student life has a lot of other ways for students to get involved. Can you just talk a little bit more about student life and its impact on campus?
Yeah, so student life, obviously I work directly with student clubs, but we have other things. So we have larger campus events that, students might see through the Chaparral Activities Board. That is just ways for students to just connect with each other while they're on campus and again, make them feel more like they're part of the COD community, which really goes a long way when you're taking into consideration your whole college experience. But we also have really cool leadership programs. So we have the Living Leadership Program, which is a self-paced program and kind of like a choose your own adventure thing. So you can go through and pick different workshops, documentaries, speakers, of topics that are interesting to you. And then you're reflecting on that and just kind of building your understanding of your own leadership and your leadership portfolio through that. And then we have the Orientation Leader Program, which is a summer leadership program. It's not so much choose your own adventure like the Living Leadership Program is, but you are going through different leadership trainings to help us welcome new students onto campus.
Again, great ways for students to get involved and develop these very valuable skill sets. So we're probably hitting on this already, but why should someone consider getting involved on campus?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's lots of benefits to getting involved. Number one, it's fun. You get to meet people with similar interests to you. I always, when I'm talking about our clubs, I always end up talking about like the sci-fi fantasy group, just because they encompass so many things, but it's something that they are specifically interested in, like video games, Marvel movies, all the like comic book stuff. They like all of that. They get together and they plan events. So every year they host this really big like comic convention at COD. So that experience is so cool, but like, you're building all of those skills of planning this large scale event while doing something that you really love to do and connecting with people that, you will probably, continue those relationships with them long term. There's that. So that's fun and, useful skills. There's the networking piece. So if you are in an academic club, your like professors and your advisors, if they're advising those groups, they have networks in the field and experience getting into the field that you're wanting to get into already, so they can be a resource in that way. Just connecting with faculty members and staff is always great in case you need a recommendation letter or someone to review something before you're applying to like different schools or things like that. So those are just some of the perks of getting involved, but definitely the big one, like I said, is it's fun. It gives you a sense of belonging when you are on campus, which in turn like helps you perform better everywhere else in the classroom, outside of the classroom. It's a good time.
So just thinking of being able to see students at that early end, and then they get involved, and then you see how they're growing. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what changes you're seeing happen with those students before and after?
Yeah, I would say the biggest is you see an increase in just confidence of how the student, interacts with the environment around them, but also you see confidence in communication. Like this year, I advised the Student Leadership Council, and seeing our officer team write emails to administrators and things like that, it is an opportunity that you wouldn't get otherwise, but seeing just that growth in writing and like, how do you actually invite an administrator to your club meeting? I think that's really cool. So confidence in that, confidence in like event planning, you see a lot more organization skills develop as well. If you've ever tried to plan an event at COD, there's a lot, or at any school, there's a lot of moving pieces and deadlines and policies that you have to keep track of. So our student leaders are, doing all of that and becoming mini experts on event planning in this scenario. So all of those things are things where I see students build confidence and increase their skills.
Yeah, a lot of very valuable skill sets developing here that are going to be needed as they move forward if it's a transfer school, and certainly in the workforce. A lot of what you just mentioned are those transferable skills that we talked about in that previous episode, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. A big one too, I didn't touch on this, but a big one is just interpersonal relations. Like there's so many people in a club, not everyone is going to get along all the time. So our club officers are, managing that and doing conflict resolution, working with their advisors, finding different solutions. So just those types of people skills, I think, are huge too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you threw that one in there because we can't overlook how valuable that is. So as we wrap up here, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners about the value of being involved as a student?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a few different times, but just the importance of, finding your community when you're on campus, it really makes all the difference. Like you'll see students who are involved, tend to do better in the classroom and just have a better time when they are at whatever institution that they're at. But also just the importance of building your network. I mentioned at the top how, I wasn't originally going into higher ed. I was in a totally different program. But just through being involved and networking with other faculty and staff at my undergrad institution is how I kind of saw this path for myself. And having those networks really helped me navigate, how do I get into higher ed? How do I get into this field? So yeah, all things that I don't think I would have even known were an option if I had not been involved.
Thank you for sharing all this wonderful information. We're going to dive into this as a group here in the podcast to talk about this experience as a student and getting involved to help move forward with the career. But I think you made that a really easy conversation for us just because the two go naturally hand in hand. So thanks for being here. Yeah,
no problem. Thank you for having me.
Michelle and Rebecca, I found a lot of value in what Jelymar had to say, but what stood out to you?
Yeah, so just the whole idea of how getting involved is so important was what stood out to me, and it just really allows you to meet people and challenge yourself, especially as a student who's learning and growing. So the main message I got here was get involved early, and I totally feel that message because when I was a community college student, I wasn't really focused on getting involved and meeting people. I was just driving to and from school. So I really missed the opportunity to meet new people and build those skills and really find my community like Jelymar was talking about. I made up for it when I transferred, which was good because when I did that, I was able to meet students and faculty. I was able to build that community and also new opportunities grew from that. But again, I didn't take advantage of all my community college had to offer. So just do it as early as you can because it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, actually, I have always been disappointed in myself because I did not take advantage of student clubs and student organizations. And I really think that, I think I did a little, but man, I think it really would have changed my experience. And the thing is not just my experience in college, but kind of what she said is after, because that is a great place to meet people who can be references. Just even a real basic thing there, people to network with, but also all of those great transferable skills. They were all, she mentioned every single one that we talk about. But I think the one that I liked that she said was interpersonal relationships. That one stood out to me. And she was talking about it almost a little bit as a manager. So that kind of goes back to the leadership piece, right? If you're the vice president or president of a club and there's interpersonal issues with students and how do you deal with that? But I think what we were just talking about before the interview with leadership, that even if you're just a member of the club and you are a role model, someone that's helping to keep the group going, coming up with innovative ideas, being a part of planning an event. There's a lot of great ways to work on your teamwork, like how you work with others, but also that leadership as well.
Yeah, that really surprised me too with the conflict resolution that she mentioned. I was like, wow, I didn't think about that.
But totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so whenever I have a student in my office and we're working on a resume, one of those first questions I ask after they say, I haven't worked, I'm like, how have you been involved? Right? Because there's so much to draw from these pieces, even if they're not in that officer position, because they could be that role model. They could be working with other people in these different components. So there's so much there.
And I like that she talked about like an increase in confidence and communication, even just the simple thing of emailing and asking people. Again, these are all skills that employers look for. So like when you say talking about resumes, I've talked to employers about what do you look for in an intern? And always it's people that are involved. And to me, that could be a job, right? But it could totally be volunteer work, and it could absolutely be being in a student club.
So I want to say the big thing that stuck out to me, she called it the big one as far as why someone should get involved. She said it was because it's fun.
Yeah.
But I want to put a different perspective on that, right? It's not just fun. It's like professional building fun. So you get to have fun as you're like developing these skill sets for your future. And what better way to do that is having fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it shows that you are willing to go beyond just classes, that you're someone that that kind of it almost goes with that like career and self-development piece of like, I'm going to go beyond to develop myself, to get involved, to learn, to grow. And like she mentioned, the sci-fi fantasy club, like it doesn't even have to be a club that's an academic club. Those are great. Should always look at those. But it can also be something that is just purely fun, but you're sneaking in some great experience there too.
Yeah, and I loved how she talked about networking with faculty too. I know when I was a student, I was always so nervous to talk to my faculty members, and I know you're supposed to introduce yourself and stuff like that, but I think being in a club and being able to work with a faculty in that capacity makes it a little bit easier to approach them. So
yeah, they're not in charge of your grade.
Exactly. Right. They're just in charge of having fun with you.
Right.
No, but yeah, I loved that piece too. And I think that's so true. And you get to learn about who is in your industry of interest. So I like that she mentioned that.
Okay, and I just remembered one more thing, which was the benefits of starting a new club.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's almost like starting a business. I mean, it's a little smaller scale, but the concept of that, like a charter, or like coming up with, how it should be structured and what are you going to do and what's the purpose and recruiting people to be involved, marketing it. That's everything. So that's really cool if you can talk about being innovative.
Yeah, very invaluable experience.
So before we wrap up this conversation, I just want to throw it out there. There's a lot of student focus pieces going on with this conversation. So what can our non-student listeners take away from this conversation?
Yeah, a lot, right? I think it really talks about that being involved in things outside of your main work is invaluable, for anybody. So that could be volunteering, maybe with your kids or, one of their groups, or just on your own, being involved with a charity as like a board member or just a volunteer. I think those are great opportunities to network, meet with other people, grow your skills. And I think we don't often think about how we can use it as an opportunity to meet people that we wouldn't normally meet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was going to say that, kind of just echoing what you were saying, that it's really hard to get involved as a non-student sometimes because those opportunities to get involved aren't always in one place like they are for students, right? And like you were mentioning, Rebecca, life and work responsibilities can sometimes get in the way of getting involved. And I'm actually experiencing this right now too. So I want to get involved, but there's just so much going on. But just kind of an idea of just starting small. So like if you can't get involved outside of work, you could always see what's available at work. I know here, for example, at College of DuPage, we can donate to the pantry on campus. There are tons of events going on with the holidays coming up and donations. So yeah, just think about how you can get involved at work if you can't get involved outside of that time. And then if you can't commit to like weekly involvement, maybe try a volunteer day with a friend. So yeah, we can all do it together.
Great advice. Yeah.
And just to bring it back to what she said is the big one, the fun.
Yes.
If you can find something that you find fun and then volunteer to support it, that could be a great way to get involved beyond work and not feel like you have to be doing something outside of work. It's just like, I'm having fun, but
Right.
it's skill building.
Well, and also this kind of goes with like you're saying, like at work, and you kind of expand that, but it can also be a hobby. There's oftentimes you might be a part of a running group or, something else that's part of a hobby, but maybe that group you could come up with, hey, let's do a food drive, or hey, let's do something that's kind of outside of what we normally do together. I'm having ideas right now, like, oh, my book club, like we could maybe like as a group do other things, and then now all of a sudden that becomes something you could talk about in an interview, something you could talk about on your resume that isn't just like a fun hobby. It's actually a little bit more than that.
Yeah, and you took the lead on it,
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for helping digest this wonderful conversation I had with Jelymar. And I'm going to hand it over to Michelle now to answer this week's listener mailbag question.
Great. Thanks, Pierre. So today's question is, I'm a stay-at-home parent and I'm ready to get back into the workforce, but I don't have any work experience to include on my resume in the last 10 years. What do I do? So I love this question because I feel like we work with clients and students in the same position. So I'm happy to answer it.
I just met with someone
Oh.
right before our recording today.
There you go.
It was the same question.
Yeah. So to answer your question, listener, you've gained skills as a stay-at-home parent that you can definitely highlight on your resume. So I want you to think about some ways that you've been involved, whether that's been in the community, have you done any freelance work? You can also include volunteer positions within your child's school district. So for example, have you volunteered your time to the PTA? What about for field trips, maybe school parties, lunch hours? Those are all really valuable experiences that you can put on a resume. It is also optional to add a section on your resume for being a stay-at-home parent where you can then add bullet points or include bullet points that explain what transferable skills that you've gained. But obviously, we do want to make sure that they're relevant to the job posting as well. Also, on your resume, in your professional summary, you can also mention that you're transitioning back to a specific industry as well. So if a company does have an issue with you being a stay-at-home parent or putting that on your resume, it's probably not the place that you want to work or the right place for you. So with that being said, never discount your experiences and think about what transferable skills you have from being a stay-at-home parent that you can bring into the workplace. If you have a question for us, I wanted to remind you all that you can submit it to careerpodcast@cod.edu or on social media at COD Career Center.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks for answering that very common and important question that we get, Michelle. Thanks to all our listeners, and special thanks to Jelymar for joining us on the podcast. We hope you are feeling motivated to go out and get involved. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we talk about ending the year strong.